Okay, everybody, welcome to our September 2021 Green Friday program. We are really excited to have as our speaker, Matt Johanson, who is going to talk about tales and trails of California's mountains. He is a biker, hiker, mountain climber, and also a teacher and a writer. And he has a number of published books about the outdoors, in particular, Yosemite Epics, Yosemite Adventures, and Sierra Summits. And his newest work is California Summits, in which he promises will show us 50 easy to do climbs in California. So everybody, clip on your carabiners and welcome Matt, who is going to tell us about all the exciting mountain climbing things that you can do here in California.
Well, thank you very much, Liz. I hope I can live up to that. I don't know if I can promise 50 easy mountains to climb, but I can promise 50 manageable and attainable summits to climb. And some of them will be easy and others less so. Thank you so much for coming, everyone. The first mountain I'd like to tell you about is the first big mountain that I ever climbed, which is Mount Shasta. And I'm actually pretty excited that I've got my old friend Paul Densler in the meeting, who was with me on this climb. So, hey, Paul, thanks for coming. The first big mountain I ever climbed, and if you know anything about climbing, then you might know that that already spells trouble, because the easiest route on Mount Shasta requires 10 miles of hiking and 7,000 feet of elevation gain, which is a lot. Before dawn on our second day, wind raged so fiercely that it felt like the hand of God slapping our tents around. It broke the poles of one tent, forcing all of us to cram into the other, all four of us, and sleep became completely impossible. We faced a decision that next morning to go down or up. Continuing the ascent made no sense. Wind blasted snow off the slopes and felt strong enough to do the same to us. Most other climbers were wisely heading down. But we pushed up anyway. Hours of hard labor burned our thighs and our lungs. High altitude sun scorched our faces. Somehow we muscled our way to the summit, and then the cold chased us back down again minutes later. Still, pulling off such a significant climb on our first try felt great. That adventure marked the beginning of my mountain climbing career, which has continued ever since. And I'd like to tell you about some of the highlights and favorite outings. And I hope that in the process that I inspire you to get outdoors and stretch your limits too. I'm going to talk about each of my books a little bit, and I'm going to get to each of them in turn here, but in case you don't get to the end, these are the 4 books I've written about outdoor adventure. And if you want to take a look at them, you can find them on my website at sierrasplendor.com/books. And I've got copies, signed copies there for sale with Venmo or PayPal. Yosemite's towering rock walls, cascading waterfalls, rushing rivers, and rounded domes gush with grandeur. Lafayette Bunnell arrived with the Mariposa Battalion in 1851 and described seeing it for the first time. He wrote, "None but those who have visited this most wonderful valley can even imagine the feelings with which I looked upon the view. A peculiar, exalted sensation seemed to fill my whole being, and I found my eyes in tears with emotion." Reminds me of my first visit to Yosemite. This majestic place has produced a similar response among Americans for well over a century, and from Native Americans for millennia. Skip one. There it is. Cathedral Peak stands in Tuolumne Meadows, the area of the Yosemite high country. John Muir made the first known ascent in 1869. Cathedral was also my first big rock climb, and the scenery exhilarated me. That's where I first learned how to climb granite slabs and cracks, which I'd never done before and didn't know how. I still remember in particular one crack near the top that completely stymied me. I got stuck there for a while. But we were high in the mountain and there was no way down but up. There was no choice but to figure it out. So I learned to jam my feet in the crack and contort my hands to stand and pull up without handholds or footholds. It was a great feeling to get on top of the mountain. We're a little bit happy there, as you can see. I've returned to climb it 6 more times with multiple partners, and it's always a great day. I should say a little something about the ratings here. So Cathedral Peak is 10,912 feet high. The southeast buttress of it, which is the most popular route that we did, is 5 pitches long, which means 5 rope lengths. And 5.6 is the technical difficulty of it, which is on the easy to moderate end of the Yosemite decimal system. Right by Cathedral Peak is Eichorn Pinnacle. And if you ever do climb Cathedral Peak, I hope that you also spend some time at least appreciating Eichorn Pinnacle. Some people tell me that they think this photo is scary, but Eichorn Pinnacle is only at 5'4", so it's on the easy side of the difficulty scale, and only one pitch. It's right next to Cathedral, so it makes a perfect nightcap. It's named for Jules Eichorn, who achieved 26 High Sierra first ascents from 1930 to 1952. Well, everybody who visits Yosemite wants to climb Half Dome, or at least admires it and thinks about it. The Awanichi called the mountain Tisiak after an Indian woman of legend. On it, they saw her face and her tears. Josiah Whitney declared the summit perfectly inaccessible, but George Anderson made the first known ascent in 1875, drilling holes in the granite to insert bolts. Then, having difficulty keeping his footing in his boots, he climbed his bolts without them and reached the top barefoot. Today, hikers use cables bolted to the granite to pull themselves up the steepest section. Climbers go straight up the vertical face, starting with Royal Robbins and Company in 1957. That route has always been way over my head, but there is a climb called Snake Dike that runs up the south side of the dome, not especially hard at 5'7", but that R that you see in the rating means run out, which means that there are long distances between bolts or protection. So a leader who falls could drop a long distance before the rope catches him, maybe 100 feet, maybe more. That's not for everyone. It always makes my heart pound, but it feels great to finish it. And I've done that route 4 times, including once with my brother, who you see there. The John Muir Trail might be the most beautiful hike in the world. I've got a hunch that more than one person in the Zoom tonight has hiked the John Muir Trail. The northern end leads through Yosemite. The full route is 220 miles long, but hikers can do it in segments. Happy Isles to Tuolumne Meadows to Red Meadows is 57 miles and might be the prettiest part of the John Muir Trail. I've got a couple of suggestions for anybody thinking about trying it someday. One key to success is take your time and don't rush it. My first time out, I completely underestimated how long it would take because I looked at the mileage, but not the elevation change on the map. I missed a very important part of the equation because the elevation gain, of course, slows you way down. So I learned to slow down and to take my time out there. There's so much to enjoy that once you get out there, I really think that you want to stay as long as you can. One other thing about the John Muir Trail, it's a great activity if you're trying to get in shape or lose weight, whether you want to or not. The resupply options are a week or more apart, so you've got to stretch your food supply. Hike all day, don't eat much, adds up to a can't miss diet plan for anyone trying to get in shape or drop a few pounds. The Pacific Crest Trail runs through Yosemite too. The full trail is 2,650 miles from Mexico to Canada. The portion through Yosemite is among the more rugged, difficult parts. It takes hikers to a seldom visited part of the backcountry. I can tell you that Yosemite does not feel crowded when you're a few dozen miles away from the nearest road. The PCT has become more popular, probably thousands of people attempting it every year. Lots of them quit before they get to Yosemite though. This segment is a nice alternative to the John Muir Trail. For one main reason, it's much easier to get a permit. It goes past lots of beautiful lakes, good fishing and swimming. I'm trying to do the whole PCT in segments, and I've done so far about 500 miles of it, or 20%. So clearly I need to get on it and get out there and get to work. Not many people enjoy Yosemite in winter, but I think more would if they knew how spectacular it is. If you have any ability or experience in snowshoeing or cross-country skiing, or if you're willing to learn, Dewey Point makes a fine, moderate trip. It's 7 miles from the parking area at Badger Pass to a fantastic spot on the valley rim and back. That spot, Dewey Point, overlooks the Cathedral Rocks in El Capitan. It might be the best winter day trip in the state. Another one is, well, I keep skipping past things I want to talk about. Sorry, where's my... There's a slide I was going to talk about, and I don't see it here, darn it. All right, skipping to the Trans-Sierra ski trip from Lee Vining to Yosemite Valley. That might be the best winter trek that I know. You get to ski through Tuolumne Meadows. There are 2 backcountry cabins along the way, which you can use, but you have to be ready to camp in the snow too. You need the skills and the right gear. You've got to be ready to break trail through fresh powder if needed, which is hard work. But if you can deal with all that, skiing through the Yosemite High Country, I think, is a lifetime highlight. Now, a lot of these trips I've been talking about might sound daunting to a lot of people. Of course, Yosemite does offer plenty of more manageable day trips, like the Mariposa, Merced, and Tuolumne groves of giant sequoias, which are the largest and oldest trees in the world and among the most beautiful. There are lots of great day trips. You can't go wrong with the Mist Trail to Vernal Fall and the most popular hike in the park. If you go that far, I think you might as well keep going to Nevada Fall and come back on the John Muir Trail, which makes a nice loop. Oh, by the way, here we are finishing the Trans-Sierra ski trip. I'm advancing, seem to be skipping some slides here as I go, so I'm trying to kind of stay in order. Okay, here's our giant sequoias. And speaking of waterfalls, there are a lot of lesser known gems in the park like Wapama Falls and Hetch Hetchy. It's a half-day trip out to that and back. Hetch Hetchy area in general is interesting, scenic, and little visited, as is Chilnawalna Falls near Wawona in the southern part of the park. And I really think that you haven't been to Yosemite until you spent time in Tuolumne Meadows. It's a great destination in summer and fall, less crowded and cooler than the valley. It offers solitude and scenery at places like Elizabeth Lake. If you've ever thought about climbing a fairly easy mountain, Lembert Dome makes a perfect objective. A nice moderate trail leads to the summit, and you can go out and back on that in a few hours and feel like a mountain climber. All these trips I've talked about so far went into my first guidebook, Yosemite Adventures. There are lots of Yosemite guidebooks on the market, of course, so I tried to make mine unique by including multiple types of outings, day trips, overnight trips, winter outings, beginning rock climbs, and also mountain climbs. And I hope the result is a guide to experiencing Yosemite in a more complete and, I would say, better way than most tourists do. In my years of exploring Yosemite, I met a lot of fascinating people, loved hearing their adventures, and eventually realized that I wanted to document their stories, which I did. El Capitan is the most coveted mountain in the world for rock climbers. Countless stories surround it. One of them involves my friend Hans Florine, who pioneered the practice of speed climbing. Let me talk about that for a moment. The first ascent of El Capitan took Warren Harding and party 47 days in 1958. Hans Florine and Alex Honnold got that down to 2 hours and 23 minutes in 2012. Long before that, Hans' first climb on El Cap went quite a bit less smoothly. He spent a sleepless night hanging in his harness, ran out of food and water. Now that he's done El Cap around 200 times, oh my God. I find it comforting to know that even Hans had a hard go once. And maybe that means that small-time climbers like me have some upward mobility in the climbing world someday. You might know Tommy Caldwell, who's the middle climber there, from his movie Dawn Wall, which is a terrific climbing film. He and Alex Honnold improved the El Cap nose speed record to a mind-boggling 1 hour and 58 minutes. Before that, he had a scare on a different El Cap route called El Corazon. I talked about runouts a few moments ago. He had to risk a much bigger one than I've ever dreamed of to get off the rock, which the drawing there illustrates. Better him than me. And then on the right, John Bachar was the king of free solo climbing before Alex Honnold came along. To free solo means to climb without a rope or protection. Just a small number of climbers ever do that. John talked to me about a terrifying close call he had on a climb called Moratorium, which convinced me that I would never try free soloing, although it's fascinating to hear about and to watch. Lynn Hill is another Yosemite legend and the first climber, woman or man, to free climb the nose of El Capitan. Not free solo, but free climb, which means that she used a rope for protection. Before that, she and a boyfriend climbed a hard route called Astroman on Washington Column, got in trouble, ran out of water, ran out of daylight, got caught in the rain. When these things happen, it's nice to have someone like Lynn Hill on the team. Her boyfriend was older and more experienced at the time. but Lynn still emerged as the hero, led the hardest climbing, and bailed out the team. You have any snowboarders here. This is the king of Yosemite snowboarders, Jim Zellers, who dreamed to do something that no one else had ever done, snowboard down the side of Half Dome. To do that takes expert ability, nerves of steel, and specific and rare conditions for the snow to even stick to the steep slope. Jim called it the half a brain project because he said it took half a brain to want to do it. He trekked out there with a snowboard 5 years in a row trying to catch the right snow. Once went out with his wife and they found snow that looked so unstable that she threatened to divorce him if he climbed up it, so he backed off. He finally had his run, and shortly after he did, the whole snow slope slid down right where he had been. So snowboarding Half Dome is something else that I'm never going to do. My favorite story that I documented involves Royal Robbins, the climbing legend who I mentioned earlier. Arthritis led Robbins to shift from climbing to kayaking in his 40s. He liked whitewater nearly as much as Grant, but later got to enjoy both into his 70s because his arthritis eventually improved. And positive thinking had everything to do with that, he believed. He said to me, "My improvement coincided with my decision not to let arthritis rule my life. The more optimistic you are, the better things go. I've been able to achieve things most people consider extraordinary by the power of that principle." Personally, I find that very inspiring. And as I get older, that becomes more valuable advice to me all the time. These stories and others fill the pages of my first outdoors book, which was Yosemite Epics. The illustrations that I've shared with you are the work of artist Christopher Hampson, who partnered with me on the book, happens to be a former student of mine. And it was a privilege to work with him and get to know these athletes and to share their stories. Now, I'm nowhere near the League of the Climbers I've mentioned, but El Capitan called to me too, still does. There's one route on it within my reach, the East Buttress, which is far easier than all of the other routes on the mountain, but it was still a good achievement for me. I partnered with a English climber I met in Camp 4, which is the climber's mecca in Yosemite Valley. He was a fantastic climber and partner. To better climbers, this route is not a big challenge, but doing it even once was a big highlight for me, the East Buttress of El Capitan. By the way, speaking of El Capitan, the Awanichi called the mountain Tutakanula. Their legend says that two bear cubs slept on a large flat rock near the river. The rock grew until the bears scratched their faces against the moon. Mother bear called on all the animals to rescue her babies. None succeeded until the inchworm Tutakanula crawled to the top and led the cubs down. So maybe the first ascent for El Capitan should be credited to Tutakanula. Something else about El Capitan. You don't actually have to climb it to go up to the summit of El Capitan. You can hike to the top, and hardly anybody does that. Maybe it's because it's a 15-mile hike, which is a lot in one day. But then again, everybody wants to do Half Dome too, which is 16 miles and requires a permit that's almost impossible to get. So I'm all for everybody going to Half Dome. All Yosemite people have to do Half Dome sometime. But don't forget El Cap because it's a shorter hike. It takes no permit, and it might be actually an even better hike than Half Dome, I think. Another great choice in Yosemite is Clouds Rest. This one is 14 miles round trip, so a little shorter than even El Cap. 1,800 feet of gain is a lot less than it takes to get up on top of Half Dome or El Cap. No permit needed. You get a great view of Half Dome and the valley. Members of the Mariposa Battalion named Clouds Rest in 1851 when they saw clouds settling on the peak before snow. That ominous sign sent them scurrying back to camp to weather the storm. Tenaya Canyon, named for the Awanichi chief, runs below the peak, and according to folklore, carries Tenaya's curse he angrily pronounced after battalion soldiers killed his son. In the right light, some even see Tenaya's wrathful face on the side of the mountain. And that's it right there.
Oh, yeah.
Let's visit a good starter mountain, Sentinel Dome. Just takes 2.5 miles round trip and 400 feet of climbing to gain the top. Atop Sentinel Dome lived a picturesque Jeffrey pine for 400 years. Incredibly, the tree grew out of granite with no visible soil on a high windswept perch. Thousands of photographers, including Ansel Adams, captured its image. This picture shows my dad's scout troop on Sentinel beneath the Jeffrey pine in 1952. The tree died in 1977, but it's still a popular hike and the best one for kids that I've mentioned so far. I'm finally going to take us out of Yosemite as I keep talking about attainable summit hikes. By the way, I meant to say at the start of this that I'd be glad to take questions at the end. And if there's some questions that come up along the way, we could even do that. If you want to write them in the chat, Liz and Joanne are keeping an eye on the chat for me. And sometime when I catch a breath, you can tell me if there's a question I should get to soon. I don't mind doing that along the way. Lake Tahoe. Mark Twain described his first sighting of Lake Tahoe, calling it the fairest picture the whole earth affords. One outing near Lake Tahoe is Lover's Leap on Highway 50. Dozens of peaks across the United States share the name Lover's Leap. Various legends and tall tales indicate that romantic tragedies occurred on them, but no actual proof of any lovers leaping from their summits has surfaced yet. The Pony Express delivered mail through the river canyon neighboring this Lover's Leap in the 1860s. This popular climbing area attracted Alex Honnold for his first free solo climbs. To hike to the top requires just 3 miles round trip and 500 feet of gain. North of Lake Tahoe stands Martis Peak. This one has a fire lookout that's staffed in summer, and in winter is open as a warming hut for skiers. You can hike, bike, or ski or snowshoe there, depending on the season. Or in summer, you can drive nearly all the way to the top and still get this same view. Mount Tallac is the summit that the Washoe called Tallac, meaning Big Mountain. And members of the Wheeler Survey adapted the name as Tallac in 1877. A snow cross appears across the northeast face. Various legends predicted that if it melts completely, it would signal a heavy winter or war, or even the end of the world. Here's a story that I really love about Mount Tallac. Students and staff from nearby Mount Tallac High School make an annual ascent, which changes lives for the better. One student wrote that once you get to the top, you realize you pushed through to make it, and the feeling of accomplishment and happiness overwhelms you. You could have that feeling too if you were willing to hike 10 miles round trip and climb about 3,200 feet. We're going to go to the Eastern Sierra, where the jagged peaks rise so sharply that they can appear quite intimidating. So thought Mary Austin, a settler and author who moved to the town of Lone Pine in 1892. But the steep mountains grew on Austin, who hiked and camped among them for 15 years. She wrote, "When those glossy domes swim into the alpenglow, wet after rain, you conceive how long and imperturbable are the purposes of God." Mammoth Mountain. Volcanic eruptions formed this lava dome 57,000 years ago. Mammoth Mining Company formed in 1878, and the mountain and the future town derived their names from that short-lived business. Mammoth is a popular ski area in winter and hiking and biking area in summer and fall. If you hike to the summit station, you can take the gondola back down for free. That makes it a 4-mile hike that climbs 2,100 feet. And a nice bonus about that is you can get a hot lunch and a beer at the summit station before you come back down. At White Mountain, a cairn and oral history indicate that Paiutes summited the mountain long before other groups arrived in California. Government scientists have studied physiology, physics, astronomy, and even missile technology here since 1948. It's also home to the Sierra Bighorn sheep, as you can see. This is where my friend Bob Coomer, known to hikers as Four-Wheel Bob, became the first wheelchair climber to summit a California 14er. That's a mountain that's at least 14,000 feet tall. Bob did that in 2007, and he is still the only wheelchair athlete to do that in California. From the nearest trailhead, it is a 15-mile round trip hike that gains 2,500 feet. The trailhead, the top trailhead, is 11,700 feet tall. So you definitely want to acclimate first. It's a great idea, actually, to spend the night somewhere at elevation before you even go there. Spend another night at the trailhead before you try to go to the summit. The Central Sierra, or the Motherlode. This is where trapper Jedediah Smith attempted the first crossing of the Sierra Nevada by European Americans in 1827. His party nearly perished in a fierce snowstorm. He wrote, "During the night, the storm increased in violence and weather became extremely cold. Snow was flying direction. It seemed that we were marked for destruction, but he that rules the storms willed it otherwise, and the sun rose clear upon the gleaming peaks. Though 3 animals perished, Smith and his party survived. They later cresting the range near Ebbetts Pass. This part of the Sierra Nevada range still feels remote and untamed compared to places like Yosemite and Lake Tahoe. Close to Smith's ordeal and a good starter mountain in this area is Ebbetts Peak, just 1 mile round trip, gaining 400 feet, named for John Ebbetts, who led a group over the pass in April 1850 and recommended the route for a railroad crossing. South of there stands Stanislaus Peak. This mountain's name honors a Yokut, originally named Cucunuchi, born in 1798. The Spanish forced his family to Mission San Jose in 1821 and called him Estanislao after a Polish saint. But he and about 400 followers escaped in 1827. Then Estanislao rallied 4,000 Yokuts and Chumash against the missions. Today, Stanislaus Peak stands as one of few California mountains named after a Native American. A river, county, and national forest honor his name too. But ironically, the title which they all use is an anglicized version of a Spanish name, not his original name of Cucunuchi. The hike on top of Stanislaus Peak is 8 miles round trip and climbs 1,800 feet, accessed from Highway 108 near Sonora Pass. Kings Canyon and Sequoia National Parks. Before thousands of climbers ascended Mount Whitney every year, Buffalo soldiers reached the summit in 1903. They were the first African Americans to climb the mountain. They built the first trail to the summit, and Captain Charles Young described the scenery as the grandest he had seen. He wrote, "A journey through this park will convince even the least thoughtful man of the needfulness of preserving these mountains just as they are." Under Young's command, Buffalo soldiers protected Sequoia National Park's big trees, guarded against poachers, and built an access road. A nice starter mountain in Sequoia Kings Canyon area is Buena Vista Peak. A ranger named this peak in 1895 in honor of its broad and majestic view of the San Joaquin Valley and the high Sierra peaks above. It's a good warm-up outing at 2 miles round trip, gaining 400 feet, suitable for kids, nice in winter if you're comfortable on cross-country skis or snowshoes. Mount Whitney. This mountain's name honors Josiah Whitney, who led a geological survey of California in 1860. Inyo County residents made the first recorded ascent in 1873. It's the highest mountain in the lower 48 states, and my first high Sierra peak, which I did with my Uncle Ted and cousins Peter and Maggie. It's a special trip for us because it was the only hike of that kind that we did together, and it was my uncle's last big hike and climb before he passed away. The Paiute called the mountain Tumungaya, which means very old man. And it's good to remember that Native Americans discovered all these mountains and climbed them before anybody else, even if we don't know just where or when. This picture shows a group of all indigenous women who climbed Tumungaya in 2018. From the nearest trailhead, it is 21 miles round trip, gaining 6,200 feet. That's a lot in one day for most people. I personally think it's much more enjoyable in 2 days or more. Whitney is the third 14er that I've mentioned. There are 15 California 14ers, and I've done 6. So I definitely want to do them all. And here is, again, someplace where I need to get to work and get out there and get these done. So far, we've been touring the Sierra Nevada, which I love, but let's spread out. There's great hiking and climbing in Southern California also. People who climbed Mount San Antonio from 2007 through 2017 ran a good chance of meeting Sam Kim. After retiring, the Korean-American immigrant climbed the peak weekly or even daily in his 70s, once summiting the 10,000-foot mountain he loved 100 days in a row. Kim often took pictures and shared food with other hikers, rescuing more than a few in distress. Better than church, better than medicine, Kim said of his mountain. Ryan Mountain is one of the best short hikes in Southern California. It delivers an unmatched panorama of the surrounding desert and mountains near and far. Climbing Ryan Mountain can impart hikers with a lifelong affinity for Joshua Tree National Park. just 3 miles round trip, gaining 1,000 feet. It's an excellent outing in winter, fall, or spring. In summer, you better start early. I actually think it's a lot better in winter, fall, or spring than in summer. San Jacinto Mountain towers over the desert as the steepest mountain in the lower 48 states, but hikers can reach its summit with a surprisingly moderate effort thanks to the Palm Springs aerial tramway. Treat yourself to a ride into another world and a unique climbing experience. This mountain is a 10-mile, 2,200-foot outing if you take the tram, 20 miles and 8,000 feet without the tram. So my advice is cut yourself a break for once and take the tram. San Jacinto. Mount San Antonio rates as one of SoCal's most popular hikes for good reason. Those standing atop the mountain, which locals call Mount Baldy, can see Los Angeles, yet feel far indeed from California's largest city. Sam Kim set a goal to climb the peak 1,000 times, and he completed 800 ascents by age 79. He climbed in rain, wind, and snow. But after Kim died, more than 200 hikers summited Baldy in Kim's honor to symbolically help him reach his goal. Okay, and let's go to the Bay Area. I grew up here, so you'd think I knew all about this, but actually, when I started looking into these summits, I realized that I had a lot to learn. For one thing, I didn't know that women played such a big role in outdoors conservation here. Maddie Brown led to create Mount Davidson Park in San Francisco. Seda Coe donated Henry Coe State Park in memory of her father. Caroline Livermore helped protect Mount Tamalpais and Angel Island. Mount Caroline Livermore on Angel Island is named for her. Dr. Aurelia Reinhardt, who helped create the East Bay Regional Park District, became the first woman to serve on its board and led nearby Mills College as its president for 27 years, is another. Mount Diablo, indigenous people called it Tushiak, meaning at the dawn of time. The origin of the name Mount Diablo may stem from a skirmish between the Spanish and the Chukcan. Angry that their foes had defeated them, the Spanish called the spot Monte del Diablo, or Devil's Woods. And it seems that English speakers later applied that name to the mountain. There's lots of ways to do Mount Diablo: hiking, biking, as little as half a mile or as long as you want. It's a favorite of mine because it's the only one of these hikes that I've done with my mom. Mount Amunham. During the Cold War, the Air Force built a base which guarded against Soviet nuclear bombers. More than 100 personnel and their families lived and worked on the mountain for 23 years. The mountain reopened to visitors in 2017. That allowed the Amma Mutsun, who named the mountain, to finally return for ceremonies. Amunham means resting place of the hummingbird. Mount stands above San Jose, and a round trip to the summit is about 7 miles long. And here are a few others that even Bay Area natives may not know well or well enough. Mount Tamalpais in Marin County offers the best bay view that I know of. You can drive almost all the way to the summit or make a hike of any distance from multiple trailheads. Montara Mountain in San Mateo County looks over both the coast and the bay. Mount Sizer marks the high point and the trophy hike of Henry Coe State Park. If you get there in the spring, it's full of wildflowers and hiking and backpacking opportunities just south of San Jose. And finally, we're going to the North State, which is the land of waterfalls. This is Burney Falls. And it is also the land of volcanoes, like Lassen Peak. Native Americans had warned that Lassen was full of fire and water and that one day the mountain would blow itself to pieces. The volcano proved them right on May 22nd, 1915, when an explosion hurled rock high into the air and rained ash hundreds of miles away. The eruptions attracted national interest and led Congress to create Lassen Volcanic National Park. A 5-mile hike gaining 2,000 feet, this might be the North State's best payoff for a half-day climb. Castle Dome. If you've ever driven through the North State on Highway 5, you've seen Castle Crag State Park to the west. The granite peaks rise dramatically, and it's definitely worth a pit stop. You should really go check it out sometime. The hike to the top of Castle Dome and back covers about 5 miles and gains 2,300 feet. And we're going to finish where we began at Mount Shasta, which is my first big climb and also my favorite mountain. I've got some family history here. My dad, Tom, was a mountaineer as a young man. He inspired me to climb a number of his mountains, like Mount Ritter. He and my Uncle Ted climbed Mount Shasta a few times. This is the two of them on the right there on the summit in 1969. They were both gone by 2019, but my brother, Dan, my cousins, Peter, Andy, and I returned to climb it in their honor 50 years after their climb of the North Face. That felt great, and it became my favorite ever climb. Mount Shasta is the only mountain I've mentioned which requires crampons and ice axes to climb. So it is a step up from the others that I've discussed. But if you get a taste for this kind of adventure, you can build up to it. And I sure encourage you to try. Ever since we left Yosemite, I've been sharing from my last two guidebooks. Sierra Summits features the Sierra Nevada, including Lake Tahoe, the Motherlode, Eastside, Kings Canyon, Sequoia, and Yosemite National Parks. California Summits has Sierra Nevada outings also, in addition to SoCal, Bay Area, and North State. They both have a similar focus on mountain hikes that are achievable in 1 day or less, mostly entry level with suggestions for building up to greater challenges, with directions, maps, and all the photography, history, insider tips, and personal experiences that I can squeeze into them. I'm getting near the end. I sure hope you've enjoyed this and learned some new things about California's mountains. There are all kinds of hikes and climbs and mountains out there for all ages and ability levels. If you picked up some inspiration or trip ideas, that would make my day. I hope you get out there with family and friends, which I love to do, and I hope that you can see here. Here is a sunset because I'm wrapping up, but also a sunrise because I hope that this is the beginning of new adventures for you. And if you're interested in any of my books, you can find them at sierrasplendor.com. Get them there. There we are. Signed copies, and you can get them from me through Venmo or PayPal. I'm glad to take any questions. Thank you very much for listening. And if you're signing off soon, happy trails.